Hello guys, so this is our lesson 4, or ULOd for Financial Accounting and Reporting ACC 111. In this particular lesson, our focus is to be able to define or describe the accounting information system. So here, you have to realize that since we're talking about accounting, so there must be a system, a way of collecting the raw data and process them into information. Now, that should be in place so that you'll be able to have our outputs in an organized manner. Also, in this lesson, you will get to learn the different elements of financial statements. And what is important here is you are able to identify or classify the account titles used, common account titles used. So, dapat ma-identify nyo or ma-classify nyo yung mga accounting titles based on their classification as to what element do they belong. So, aside from that, in this lesson also, you will get to know the basic accounting equation as well as the expanded accounting equation. And most importantly, we should learn or you should be able to know the rules of debit and credit as well as the double entry system. So this is isiksik, or marami tayong pag-uusapan in this particular lesson. So let us start now. So first is accounting information system. So since we know that accounting is a system, so there must be a way of, a systematic way, an organized way of transforming raw data into useful information. So what is this accounting information system? So this system is needed to generate reliable financial information needed by the decision makers in a timely manner. It is a system that starts from the economic activities that are inputted to the system and transform them into a useful accounting information and keep the information for future use. And then this is the financial information. It shall be given to the decision makers and then go back to where the process starts. So in short, pag sinabi natin accounting information system, this is the organized, we have a mechanism in order to collect the data, the accountable transactions, record them in our system, and that it will be processed so that you will have that useful information in the form of financial statements, which will be again useful to the decision makers. So we have here 3 types of accounting information system. So one is the manual accounting information system. Second is the computer-based accounting information system. And the third one is the data-based accounting information system. So what we will be using or what we will be studying in Accounting 111 is this has something to do with manual accounting information system kasi we have to do the recording the accounting process in a manual manner. So what is manual accounting information system? So this is a system processing information using human processing abilities and skills, using papers and pen. So this uses labor intensive and became inefficient in today's complexity of accounting and business environment. So as you know, this is yung mano-mano na pag keep ng records na. So it will really be tedious because you have to do all of the process manually, from the recording to posting, classifying the accounts, to the preparation of trial balance, until the preparation of financial statement. So it is very tedious way of maintaining your records, no, or producing the output of the financial accounting, which are the financial statements. But more or less, there are still businesses nowadays that are using manual accounting information system. So especially for those entities na small, no, mga micro or small na mga entities na hindi naman gaanong karami din, no, yung mga transactions na kanilang i-record. So that would be applicable to them still, no, even nowadays. Second is the computer-based accounting information system. So this one, no, the system that processes business transactions using machine-like computers and calculators to make it more easy to achieve output that are more reliable and accurate than manual systems. So here, we are going to use, no, computers. We have equipment already, no, and also we have, say for example, you can when you say computer-based accounting information system, so you can use, for example, Microsoft Excel na to make your work easier. So you are now utilizing computers to make it easier, no, for the accountant to do his or her work. Kasi hindi na mano-mano magsusulat, so gagamit na ng Microsoft Excel, for example, no, spreadsheet, para mas mapadali yung kanyang trabaho. Then lastly, ito, database accounting information system. So this is system, no, this is advanced in the sense that in this system, the information are processed in an accounting software such as enterprise resource planning. So ito tinatawag natin ERP, no? Enterprise Resource Planning. So gagamit na tayo ng accounting software. So example niyan, you have SAP, Oracle, QuickBooks, PeopleSoft, meron ding Xero, meron ding Peachtree, no? So there are accounting software that we can use, and this is very applicable, no, and practical for those companies na maraming transactions, voluminous, and then medyo complex, no, yung kanilang business. Para isang input na lang, no, they will just input the data, no, the transaction, and then automatically that will be processed by the system, na the software, and in just one click they can generate already their financial statements. Next, we have here the stages of data processing. So tatlo man ito, no. So first is, of course, no, the process will start with inputting of your raw data, no. So i-input yung raw data, and then after that, ipaprocess ng system. Ultimately, you'll have your output. So basically, in accounting, our output is in the form of financial statements. Okay? So what are the components of financial statements? So a complete set of financial statements is composed of the following. So first, we have the statement of financial position or balance sheet, the statement of comprehensive income or income statement, the statement of cash flows, the statement of changes in owner's equity, and lastly, no, the notes to financial statements where other non-quantitative data, no, or information can be written, no, para mas ma-improve or mas ma-intindihan, no, mas meaningful, no, and relevant yung information na ibibigay natin sa ating mga users, usually the decision makers. Then we have these elements, no? Elements of financial statements. So, ano ba yung mga elements ng financial statements? So, basically, we have 5 elements na of the financial statements. So, first, we have the assets. Then, we have the liabilities. We have the owner's equity. We have income or revenue. And then, the expenses. Okay? So, just to give you a quick glance no, of these elements and to what statement, to what financial statement they relate to, then let's have the next slide. This is the quick glance of the elements of financial statements. So we have here specifically balance sheet or the statement of financial position and income statement. So for balance sheet, we have 3 elements. First is assets, second liabilities, and the third one is equity. For the income statement, we have 2. One is revenues and the other one is expenses. So let us discuss each of the element of financial statements, and I want to tell you that this section of this presentation is important because for you to easily understand and apply the concepts that will be presented in the next or in the succeeding slides, you have to familiarize yourselves with the different account titles under each element. So, ibig sabihin, it is highly recommended for you to memorize or familiarize the common account titles which are under each element, because that will help you understand easily the succeeding na mga lessons or topics. Okay, so let us start with the first element under the statement of financial position or balance sheet. So we have here assets. So ano ba yung assets? Sabi dito, it is a present economic resource with the rights that has the potential to produce economic benefits and dapat controlled by the entity as a result of past transactions or events. So, pag sinabi nating assets, these are economic resources owned by the entity. So, pwedeng building, pwedeng cash, or any other type of or kinds of assets. Now, let us go into the details of assets. Assets are classified into 2. They can be current assets or non-current assets. Ano bang kaibahan? Per revised PAS 1 or Financial Accounting Standards number 1, the entity shall classify assets as current when first, it is expected to realize the asset or intends to sell or consume it in its normal operating cycle. So, usually, yung normal operating cycle na yan, usually ay 1 year unless iba yung ginagamit or applicable for a particular business. So, pag sinabing realized, ibig sabihin, you convert it into cash. So, example, your collectible, your accounts receivable, it is expected that you are going to collect it, to convert it into cash within the normal operating cycle of the business. Second, it holds the assets for the purpose of trading, so yung ibebenta. Then it expects to realize the assets within 12 months after the reporting period. And then the asset is a cash or cash equivalent unless the asset is restricted from being exchanged or used to settle a liability for at least 12 months after the reporting period. So if you have noticed, asset is considered current when they are realizable or expected to be realized within the normal operating cycle or within 1 year, whichever is longer. Now, what are the common examples or account titles used under assets? So first, we have cash. So this is the very common kind of asset, and it is considered current asset. So pag sinabing cash, it includes coins, currencies, checks, money orders, bank deposits, and drafts. So hindi lang pala bills and coins yung kasama, but it also includes mga cheque or money orders, or mga instruments which are readily negotiable. Second is cash equivalents. So yung cash equivalent is an account used for short-term, highly liquid investments that are readily convertible to a known amount of cash that are subject to an insignificant risk of changes in values. Usually, pag sinabing cash equivalent, ito yung mga investment which are highly liquid and short-term lang siya. Usually, 3 months or less. Purchase 3 months or less before the maturity. So, example nito, pwedeng time deposit na 3 months or per treasury bills which are purchased 3 months before its maturity. Then we have notes receivable. So pag sinabing notes receivable, gagamitin ito when pledge from a customer that will pay the business at a fixed amount of money at a certain date. So ang kahibahan nito sa notes receivable ay meron talagang formal na promissory note na pipirmahan ang customer. Another is accounts receivable. So these are claims against customers arising from sale of service or goods on credit. So ang kaibahan doon kanina, nung sa notes receivable, meron talagang formal na promise in writing as to when to pay and how much the applicable interest rates. But then here in accounts receivable, this is just an oral promise to pay. So walang written agreement between the parties involved. Then we have inventories. So inventories are that are held for sale in the ordinary course of business. So still in the process of production for such sale or in the forms of materials or supplies to be consumed in the production of goods or rendering service. So ito yung mga ititinda natin or mga paninda natin in the ordinary course of our business. Then next we have prepaid expenses. So these are expenses paid for by the business in advance. Like example, kung nagbayad ka na advance ng renta, so that's prepaid expense. Asset ng company yan kasi nga hindi pa man siya na-expire, hindi pa man nakagamit, hindi ka pa nakapag-enjoy kasi nag-advance ka ng bayad. So those are the common account titles for current assets. So let's proceed to non-current assets naman. So for non-current assets, we have here the property, plant, and equipment. So this is the account used for tangible, meaning it has physical substance, so you can see it, that are held by an enterprise for use in supply or production of goods or services, for rental to others, or for administrative purposes that are to be used for more than 1 year. So, ang example nito ay land, building, mga computer equipment, or any equipment, transportation equipment. So, these are examples of property, plant, and equipment. So, they are considered non-current because you can use them for more than 1 year pa. Depende sa item or depende sa PPE na pinag-uusapan. So, the life, or it can be usable for 3, 5, 10 years, 20 years. So, depende sa nature sa item. Now, in relation to property, plant, and equipment, we have accumulated depreciation. So, pag sinabing accumulated depreciation, this is a contra-asset account. So, pag sinabing contra-asset, it is presented as a deduction to the related account. Like, for example, if you're talking about a building, So, building, when you constructed it, for example, so you're going to recognize it at cost. Now, over the years, yung paggamit mo ng building, magde-depreciate yan. So, every year, dine-depreciate mo. So, every year, or each depreciation that you are going to charge every year, you're going to accumulate that, You're going to add up, those depreciation that you have recognized, so that the presentation of this, accumulated depreciation, it will be shown as a deduction on the cost, para makuha natin yung net book value. So, in short, PPE mo minus accumulated depreciation, that is considered now as your net book value. So, again, this is an account or contra-asset account used to accumulate all the depreciation charges. So, the effect is, itong accumulated depreciation, makaka-reduce, or makaka-decrease sa property, plant, and equipment. So, just take note lang that not all PPE are depreciable. So, there are property, plant, and equipment which are not depreciable. Especially, or example of that would be land. Because land will not depreciate but rather appreciates its value over time. Okay. So, another common account title or common for non-current assets would be intangible assets. So, ano naman tong intangible assets? These are assets that has no physical substance. So, unlike PPE na makikita mo, you have physical substance, there is really an appearance. Dito sa intangible asset, wala siyang physical substance, but it's identifiable and non-monetary assets held for use in the production or supply of goods and services, pwedeng for rental to others or for administrative purposes. So, pinaka-example nitong intangible assets ay patent, for example, patent or copyright, applicable sa mga libro. So, you're going to, or that's a fruit of your, or that's mental or your literary work. So, intellectual property yan ng gumawa. Let us proceed to the next element in the financial position, in the statement of financial position. So, we have a liability. So, pag sinabing liability, we mean utang, pagkakautang ng company. So, it is defined as a present obligation of the entity to transfer economic resources as a result of past transaction or events. So, there must be a present obligation and then it requires transfer of economic resources. So, in short, you're going to settle it through payment of, say, for example, cash, or any valuable or any asset of the company, na pambabayad mo. And take note that this is a result of past transaction or event. So for liabilities, ito yung classification din ng liabilities. So just like asset, they're also classified into current and non-current liabilities. So kailan naman natin i-report or recognize as current liability and liability? So these are the criteria para ma-classify natin as current ang isang liability. It is expected to settle the liability in its normal operating cycle. It holds the liability primarily for the purpose of trading. Its liability is due to be settled within 12 months after the reporting period. Then the entity does not have an unconditional right to defer settlement of the liability for at least 12 months after the reporting period. So, kung present ito na mga criteria, then your liability is considered current. Now, let us proceed to the common account titles for current liability. So, unang-una, we have accounts payable. So, account used for obligation that are lent by accepting goods from suppliers and the company agrees to pay the amount in the future. So, accounts payable, parang nag-oral promise to pay ka sa iyong mga supplier. So, it's related also to trading. For notes payable, so this is an account of obligation that are used for amount lent from the debtor in exchange of a promissory note. So, yung kaibahan ng accounts payable sa notes payable ay etong notes payable, meron kang formal written agreement in the form of promissory note kung kailan ka magbabayad, kano yung interest, so things like that, naka-include na or naka-indicate na sa notes payable. Then we have accrued liabilities. So this account is used when there are unpaid expenses incurred by the company. So example, yung billing mo sa kuryente for this month, mare-receive mo man yan in the succeeding month, So, you are going to receive the billing and pay it for the next month or next month na. So, since ang ating kuryente ay nagamit naman natin in the previous month, so dapat lang na you have to accrue. You accrue them. So when you say you accrue them, you have to recognize the expense na kung kailan mo nagamit yung kuryente and recognize as well a liability, yung accrued liability. So another is unearned revenue. So for this, ito yung account na gagamitin when payment is received before providing services or before the products or goods are delivered. Then we have the current portion of long-term debt. So, ito ay portion of the mortgage, notes, bonds, and other long-term obligations that are payable within 1 year after the reporting period or the balance sheet date. So, ang example ko nito, for instance lang, you availed of a loan from the bank. So, the term of the loan is 5 years. The amount is 100,000. But, your agreement with the bank is that you will be paying this on an annual basis. So, pag ganun, every year magbabayad ka ng 20,000. Say, for example, ngayong taon mo siya in-avail. So, mayroong portion sa 100,000 na i-report mo as current liability. And how much would that be? That's 20,000. Equivalent to 1 year na amortization mo or repayment mo na sa principal. So, since babayaran mo yung 20,000 within the next 12 months, it is considered as current. The other 80,000 is considered as non-current liability. Okay? So, another is, ito, mga non-current liabilities naman. So, nangawala ang picture, no? Pasensya ay. So, first is the mortgage payable. So, itong mortgage payable na to, this is a long-term debt of the entity. And take note that in this particular utang, meron kang pledge, no, as a collateral, no, as security of your loan. So, meron siyang collateral. Kaya ang tawag sa kanya ay mortgage payable. Next will be bonds payable. So, this is another long-term liability. So, this is substantial amount of money from lenders to finance the business organization's acquisition of equipment and other needed assets. So, in short, if the entity cannot secure, the needed amount in one institution, or example, bank, they cannot provide them. Say, for example, they want to, or they are needing, they are in need of 20 million and they cannot get that at once, sa bank. So what the company will do is, after complying with the requirements, sa applicable na regulatory agency or government office, so they can issue bonds to the public. So bonds are issued in denomination, so mas smaller yung amounts, so that kasi smaller yung amount siya, mas marami yung makaka-afford na bumili nung bonds na yon. So, mas madali nilang malikom yung amount needed nila if they'll do this or they'll issue bonds. Also, pag nag-issue ng bonds, yung company, meron niyang agreement, agreement as to the interest, kung kailan babayaran yung interest, kung kailan yung babayaran talaga din yung principal, kailan ba i-redeem yung bonds na yan, So, it will be stated in the agreement. So, those are the common examples of non-current liability. So, let us now proceed to equity or capital. So, pag sinabing capital, this is the residual interest after deducting all the liabilities from the total assets. And magdidepende yan, ang tawag sa kanya magdepende kung anong klase or anong type of business organization. So, pag sole proprietorship, ang tawag dyan ay owner's equity. Pag partnership, ang tawag dyan ay partner's equity. Pag corporation, that's stockholders' equity or shareholders' equity. Pag cooperatives, ang tawag dyan ay members' equity. So, ito yung mga common account titles under equity or capital. So, unang-una, of course, yung capital. So, if you have noticed, ang account title ng isang owner, nilalagyan lang ng apelyido. Like, for example, Perez Capital. So, kailan ba gagamitin yung capital? So, itong account na to, gagamitin to record the original and additional investment of the owner. Also, this account will be increased pag merong profit na na-earn. Kasi, di ba, ultimately, yung makaka-benefit ng profit ay yung owner. And, at the same time, kapag merong loss naman na-incur, then this will decrease your capital. Kasi, pag may loss, ang magsasuffer naman yan ay yung owner din ng company. Next would be withdrawals. So, when the owner of the entity withdraws cash or other assets rather than directly reducing the owner's equity account, so you course it through withdrawals. Ganun din, pag sinabing withdrawals, for example, Perez withdrawal, so lagyan mo lang ng apelyido if that's a sole proprietorship. So, the effect is nakaka-reduce siya ultimately sa equity account mo. Then, the last one is income summary, which is a temporary account. So, this is used to close income and expense at the end of the accounting period. So, this allows or this shows the profit if the balance is credit. But if it is debit, then this signifies that there is a loss. So, we will be using or we'll be discussing more about this in the later na mga topics when we discuss already closing entries. Okay, so let us proceed to financial performance, or those elements ng income statement. So we have first income or revenue. As per definition, sabi niya income or revenue or increases in assets. So nag-increase ang asset mo, or decreases in liabilities, lumiit yung liability mo, that resulted to an increase in equity, tumaas ang equity mo, pero hindi siya galing sa contributions ng owners. So, ibig sabihin, nag-increase ang asset or nag-reduce ang liability, ultimately nag-increase ang equity, pero galing siya sa operations ng company. So, it's a result of the operations of the entity. Hindi siya galing sa owners. So, it's already parang the outcome of the business operations of the entity. Okay? Then, next we have expenses. So, yung expenses naman, baliktad, no? So, itong mga expenses, this decreases in assets, or these are decreases in assets, or increases in liabilities, that resulted to a decrease in equity. So, lumiit naman yung equity mo ngayon. Pero, walang distributions na ginawa sa mga owners. So, in short, again, this is still part of the operations, or result of the operations of the entity wherein meron kang mga na-incur. Meron kang mga cost na sinakripisyo para maka-earn ka ng profit. Because when you do business, wala namang business siguro na walang expense. So, you really have to sacrifice something. So, the effect of that is maka-decrease ultimately ng equity mo. Okay? So, let us now proceed to the specific account titles for income or revenues. So, first we have service income. So, this is applicable for service concern. Then, we have sales. Ito naman, this is applicable for merchandising business. Okay, so let us now proceed to the expenses. So take note that for expenses, nahahati yan sa dalawa. So first is your cost of sales, and the other one is the operating expenses. So for the cost of sales, other term for that is cost of goods sold. So ito yung cost ng mga products na naibenta mo. So kung hindi mo pa siya naibenta, ito yung ni-report mo as inventory. Pero pag nabenta na siya, ito yung cost of goods sold or your cost of sales. So, magkano yung amount, magkano yung value ng mga natinda mo, or mga nabenta mo. For operating expenses, ito yung mga common. So, first, we have the salaries and wages. So, familiar tayo dyan, pambayad natin sa services ng mga empleyado. For utilities expense, mga sa telepono, sa electricity, fuel, water. So, these are utilities expense. Rent expense, these are expenses for space, equipment, or other asset rental. So, nagbayad ka because of the use of space ba, for your office, for example, or pwedeng equipment din na nag-rent ka lang instead of owning one. Okay? So, next, another common account titles for expenses, we have insurance expense. So, this is the portion of premiums paid on insurance coverage that has already expired. Nag-lapse na ang time. Say, for example, nagbayad ka ng January ng insurance premiums worth 1 year. So, ibig sabihin, if that was January 1, nagbayad ka January 1, and ang coverage nun ay until December 31. So, ibig sabihin, since we are already September, so we have already 9 months na expired. So, kay September naman ta karon, so 9 months na expired. So, katong 9 months equivalent should be reported as insurance expense. Next is your depreciation expense. So, this is the portion of the cost of tangible assets allocated or charged as expense during the accounting period. So, no, the portion of the tangible asset or PPE that you are charging to expense every year, no? Kasi meron tayong ina-allocate or china-charge as expense every accounting period. So, depende kung anong method na ginagamit or ginamit ng entity sa pag-compute ng depreciation. So, just take note lang class that depreciation expense is related to PPE. For intangible assets, meron din yung expense, no? Meron tayong tinatawag na amortization expense. So, amortization expense is just similar to depreciation expense, na you are going to charge a portion of your intangible asset, no, as expense over the periods na benefited. Next will be uncollectible accounts expense. Other terms for this would be doubtful accounts expense or bad debts expense. So this is the amount of receivable estimated to be doubtful of collection and charged as an expense during the accounting period. So take note, there is no actual napaglayas or wala pa jud ka nakasure nga kani siya nga collectible, dili siya makolekta. But in accounting, we already anticipated for probable losses na. So, advance tayong mag-isip. So, even if hindi pa nangyari na lumayas, for example, yung borrower or yung ating customer, so we are already, we accepted the fact that kung may pinautang ka, there's really a portion of it na hindi mo na mare-recover. And so, we are providing for it already through this uncollectible accounts expense. Next would be interest expense. So, an interest or itong interest expense na to, this is an expense related to the use of borrowed fund. So, pag may hiniram tayo, of course, wala nang free ngayon. Pag may hiniram ka, malamang meron talaga yung interest expense na i-charge sa atin. So those are the common account titles na ginagamit for expenses. Okay? So, again, at this point, I want to remind you na dapat ating ma-familiarize, or kung dili madalag familiarize, siguro pwede i-memorize. Kay, this is very important, yung ability nyo to be able to classify the account titles to what element do they belong. So, dapat ma-identify nyo or ma-classify nyo. For example, pag binigyan kayo ng account na cash, ano ba yan? So, dapat ma-identify nyo, ito siya. Itong cash na to is under assets. For example, pag sinabing notes payable, so yung notes payable na yan, that is classified as liability. Pag sinabing accrued salaries expense, ano yun? So, that is classified as liability because that is an accrued liability. So, accrued salaries expense is actually a liability. Specifically, an accrued liability. Okay? What about pag sinabing prepaid insurance? So, that is considered asset. So, again, these are very important, This is very important for you to be able to classify properly the accounts according to their elements because we will use that knowledge in our next topic. Now, let us move on to our next topic, important topic for this lesson. So, I am introducing to you the basic accounting equation. So, as you can see here, this is the diagram I presented kanina. So, these are the elements of a balance sheet. So, your assets, your liabilities, and your equity. So, take note, class, that the basic accounting equation states that assets will always be equal to liabilities plus owner's equity. And there's no exception to that. So, meaning at all times, asset will always be equal to liabilities plus owner's equity. Pag hindi balanse, yung assets mo sa liabilities plus owner's equity, ibig sabihin may mali sa ginawa mo. Kasi at all times, without exception, they should be equal. Okay? So, just to illustrate the basic accounting equation, let us try these problems. So, the first problem here, we have assets of 100,000, liabilities of 30,000. So, pag gano'n, or if this is the case, then magkano kaya yung owner's equity? No, correct, no? So, you have 70,000. So, bakit 70,000? Kasi, kung ang asset mo ay 100,000 and yung liability mo ay 30,000, i-deduct mo lang yung liability sa asset to get your owner's equity na 70,000. Kasi dapat, ang total ng liabilities tsaka ng owner's equity should be 100,000. So, wala tayong problema dyan. Now, what about number 2? So, for number 2, we are given that the assets is 60,000. The liability is missing, and then the owner's equity is 45,000. So, magkano kaya ang ating liabilities in this case? So, to get the liabilities, what you're going to do is you deduct 45,000 from your 60,000 so that you will get 15,000. So, 15,000 is your liabilities. If you're going to add 15,000 and 45,000, then you will get 60,000, which is the total assets. Okay? So, the third illustration. So, here, liability, yung asset mo, hindi given. So, ito yung missing na element. Liabilities mo, 50,000. Owner's equity mo ay 70,000. So, if you're going to add 50,000 and 70,000, of course, you will get 120,000. So, that is considered as your total assets. Next, we'll have number 4. For number 4, we are now given percentage. So, assets here is 80,000. Liabilities is 30%. And then, missing is your owner's equity. So, missing siya. So, how do we compute, How do we get owner's equity here? So, these are the given data, So, you have here, your assets is 80,000. Yung liabilities natin ay 30%. And owner's equity natin ay missing. So, how do we compute our owner's equity? So, take note, class, that our assets represents 100%. So, ibig sabihin, if your liabilities amounts or is equivalent to 30%, ibig sabihin, your owner's equity is 70%. That is 100% minus 30%. So, this is 70%. So, if you know that owner's equity is 70%, based on the asset, kasi asset is our base, it's our 100%. So, if alam mo na 70% ito doon sa 80,000, what you have to do is you just simply multiply 80,000 by 70%. So, meaning, your owner's equity will be equivalent to 56,000. So, just to complete, magkano yung amount ng liabilities natin? So, liabilities natin will be assets, 80,000 minus owner's equity of 56,000. So, ibig sabihin, your total liabilities will amount to 24,000. Okay? So, if you have questions about this, you can just raise it during our discussion or online or virtual na class. So, that's how you compute your number 4. For number 5, eto naman, how do we compute your total assets here? So, yung given naman natin ay liabilities 40% and then owner's equity na 75,000. Okay, so how do we compute? Let's see. So, ito yung given na data. Yung assets natin ay hindi given. Yun yung missing. Ang liabilities natin, ang binigay lang ay percentage. So, sabi niya it's 40%. yung owner's equity natin, meron tayong amount. That's 75,000. Now, how do we compute, no? So, firstly, you have to recognize, no, and remember that your asset is always 100%. So, ibig sabihin, if this is 100%, and your liabilities is 40%, ibig sabihin your owner's equity is 60%. That's 100% minus 40%. So, that's 60%. Now, since alam natin that 75,000 is only 60% of the 100%, then what we have to do is we compute, no, for the 100%. Okay? So, how do we compute? Mathematics, no, will tell us that for us to get, no, the 100% of 75,000, what we have to do is you divide 75,000 by its percentage. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, if you want to know magkano ba yung total, magkano ba yung 100%, kung ang 75,000 is only 60% of the total. So, to do that mathematically, what you have to do is you are going to divide 75,000 by 60% or the percentage. So, with that, you will get your total assets amounting to 125,000. So, meaning with this, no, you have already addressed the question in number 4 na magkano ba ang total assets kung ang liabilities ay 40% and your owner's equity is 75,000. So, again, since alam natin that owner's equity is 60%, kasi nga 40 yung liabilities, so to get the 100% of 75,000, all you have to do is divide 75,000 by its percentage. So, we have here 125,000. So, just to complete, no, the elements, so magkano na ba yung total liabilities? You can compute it in two ways, no? Pwedeng yung 125,000, i-multiply natin by 40%. So, that's 50,000 na ang liabilities plus owner's equity na 75,000. That's a total of 125,000. So, meaning, balance pa rin, no? Yung total assets natin is 125,000, yung total ng liabilities tsaka ng owner's equity natin ay 125,000 din. The other way of computing it is yung very simple, no? You just deduct 75,000 from 125,000. So, that is 125,000 minus 75,000. So, that's a total of 75,000. So, again, if you have questions, no, regarding this illustration, feel free, no, to ask me during our online class. So, we're done with the basic accounting equation. So, if you have, no, questions regarding this, the computations, for example, please feel free, no, to PM or you discuss that, you raise that during our online class para baka meron kayong the same question with the other so that we can address it. Okay? So, let us proceed. So, another is ito, profit computation. So, I want to discuss this with you. So since we have, I have presented to you the elements of income statement, so might as well, alamin natin, ano ba yung relevance ng mga elements na to. So, technically class, the elements of the income statement ay yung kailangan natin para makakompute tayo ng profit. So, profit is computed as revenues minus expenses. Okay? So, just to illustrate, no, the profit computation. So, we have here mga examples. So, dito, we have our profit. No, for question number 1, or item number 1, our profit is missing. So, our income or revenue is 50,000. Our expenses is 30,000. So, magkano kaya yung profit? So, that is computed as 50,000 minus 30,000. So, ibig sabihin, for number 1, our profit is 20,000. Okay? Now, for number 2, Dito ang missing natin ay income or revenue. So, anong gagawin natin? For us to get our income or revenue, no? So, kung ang profit mo ay 45,000, and then yung expense mo ay 15,000, so paano ma-compute yung revenue? So, revenue is computed, or yes, no? Income or revenue is computed as 45,000, your profit, idagdag natin ang ating expenses. So, ibig sabihin, your income or revenue here is 60,000. Okay, nakuha pa ba? Sige, so let us proceed now. Number 3. What about this one? The profit is 25,000. Your income or revenue is 75,000. So, how do we compute expense? So, malamang that's 75,000 minus 25,000. So, a total of 50,000. So, ibig sabihin, your expenses amounts to 50,000. And, kasi you can always check, no? Kasi, you can check man kung tama ba ang answer mo or hindi. Like, for example, dito, if your expenses, no, na-compute mo at 50,000, you can conform or you can confirm, no, whether tama ba or mali by deducting. Like, for example, ito, alam mo naman yung basic na formula. So, that 75,000, i-deduct mo yung 50,000. So, nagtali siya sa 25,000. So, ibig sabihin, tama yung computation mo. Okay? So, next, number 4. Ito, hindi na siya profit, but there is a loss, no? Pag naka-parenthesis yan, if it is enclosed, if the amount is enclosed in a parenthesis, meaning you have a loss. So, pag may loss, ibig sabihin, mas malaki yung expenses compared sa iyong income or revenue. So, how do we compute income or revenue? So, ganun pa din, di ba? What you have to do is, you are going to add your loss to your expenses. So, in this case, what will happen? Magkano ang ating income or revenue? So, most probably, our income or revenue is 23,000. Bakit? No, kasi yung result ay negative man na 10,000. So, meaning, this is 23,000 here. No? So, 23,000 minus 33,000. So, meaning you have a negative or a loss of 10,000. So, that's how you compute your loss. So, our answer for this item is 23,000. That's your income or revenue. So, most probably, pag ganito na loss, you would expect that revenue is less than your expenses. Next, we have number 5. So, ito, percentage na lang yung binigay. So, how do we compute for this, na? So, to continue, so this is the given data. So, you are given the income, which is 90,000, and the percentage of the profit, which is 10%. So, kapag ang ating pinag-uusapan ay profit computation, take note that yung base amount natin ay ang income or yung revenue. So, pag sinabing based amount, ito yung 100%. So, ibig sabihin, if this is the 100% and your profit ay 10%, and knowing that the equation is income or revenue minus expenses equals profit, so ibig sabihin, your expenses here is 90%. So, kasi nga, this is, the profit is 10%, and considering that it is income or revenue that is 100%. So, ibig sabihin, this is 90%. So, kung ang tinatanong niya kung magkano yung expenses, so, very simple. You just have to multiply your income or revenue by the percentage of your expenses, which is 90%. So, you will get, the expenses is 81,000. So that is equivalent to 90% of your income or revenue. Whereas, yung profit mo, so you can compute it in two ways. So, pwedeng i-multiply mo ang 90,000 by 10%, which will give you 9,000, or you simply deduct 90,000, deduct 81,000 from 90,000. So, you'll get 90 or 9,000. So, the same lang sila. So, that's how you compute for your profit kapag percentage ang ginamit. So, just take note that the base amount is the income or revenue that represents your 100%. Okay, so balikan lang natin yung elements ng financial statement. So, this diagram. So, basically, class, your balance sheet elements will comprise your basic accounting equation, which is the assets is equals to liabilities plus owner's equity. Also, your income statement elements, yun yung gagamitin natin pag-compute ng profit. So, ito yung basic profit computation, which is profit is always equal, or profit can be computed as revenues minus expenses. Now, talking about this, the basic accounting equation and the computation ng profit, I want to introduce to you this expanded accounting equation. So, what about this? Itong expanded accounting equation na to, it integrates the effects doon sa income statement, yung mga elements ng income statement dito sa ating balance sheet elements. So, as you can see, the expanded accounting equation is like this. So, your assets is equals to liabilities plus yung owner's equity natin, in-integrate natin yung mga items which can affect the owner's equity or capital. Like, for example, withdrawals can reduce, makagamay siya sa ato ang capital. So, that's why we are deducting it. Revenues, for example, are addition, increases on our capital so that these are added. Whereas expenses will reduce your capital, so that's why it is deducted. So, kung titingnan natin itong section na to, revenues minus expenses, that's actually your profit computation. So, ibig sabihin, pag mas malaki ang revenue kaysa sa expenses, which, that scenario, meron tayong profit, ibig sabihin, madadagdagan ang ating owner's equity. At, on the other hand, pag ang expenses natin ay mas malaki compared sa revenues, ibig sabihin meron tayong loss. So, pag merong loss, the effect is makaka-reduce or makaka-decrease tayo sa ating owner's equity kasi mas malaki yung i-deduct natin compared sa ating idadagdag. So, losses again can decrease your owner's equity. So, that's the expanded accounting equation. So, just to illustrate the expanded accounting equation, let's have this illustration here. So, at example, at the end of the year, an entity reported a liability of 60,000. Its owner's equity at the beginning of the year was 70,000. During the year, the entity reported revenues at 200,000. With a total cost and expenses of 120,000. Also, the owner withdrew 10,000 pesos for personal use. Yung question niya, how much is the total assets of the entity at the end of the year? So, to answer that, I want to show you the Excel computation of that. Okay, so to continue, this is the Excel computation. So, I have plotted here the given na information. So, based doon sa ating problem, sabi niya, the owner's equity daw beginning or at the end of the year, or at the beginning of the year is 70,000. Then, we have revenues at 200,000, expenses at 120,000, and withdrawals at 10,000. So, if you want to compute the owner's equity so what we have to do is, of course, mag-start tayo with the owner's equity beginning. Then, since revenues can increase your equity, we're going to add them. Then expenses can reduce your owner's equity, so you have to deduct them, as well as your withdrawals. So, ibig sabihin, ang na-compute natin, your total owner's equity at the end of the period is 140,000. Okay, so that's your owner's equity end. So that is after integrating the results of the operations for the year, no? So yung revenues, yung expenses, tsaka yung withdrawal. So if you'll try to look at this class, no, yung revenues minus expenses, no, if you will be asked kung kano bang profit. So ang profit niya ay that's 200,000 minus 120,000. So basically there's a profit of 80,000, no, for this particular operation or accounting period. So kung titingnan natin, no, yung beginning niya 70,000, meron siyang profit, no, the net of these two amounts here 80,000, so that's 150,000. Kaso lang meron siyang withdrawal na 10,000. So kaya meron na lang tayong owner's equity na 140,000. So, based doon sa given data, sabi niya, ang liabilities daw at the end of the year ay 60,000. Okay, let me correct that. So, 60,000 daw yung kanyang own liability at the end of the year. So, the question actually is, magkano yung total assets? So, since nakakompute na tayo dito ng owner's equity at the end of the period, so what you're going to do is copy na lang natin itong 140,000. So, if your liabilities, no, amounts to 60,000 and your owner's equity is 140,000, so ibig sabihin, yung total assets natin at the end of the year amounts to 200,000. So that's how you compute, no, your assets. So that is after taking into consideration the effects, no, of those mga items which could affect your capital at the end of the accounting period. Okay? Okay, so let's now proceed to the third part of this lesson, which is the getting to know, no, the double entry system. So this is the system that we'll be utilizing here. So ano ba itong double entry system? So this is a system used in accounting wherein each transaction is recorded in the books of accounts in two parts. So, dapat meron debit, tsaka merong credit. So, for every transaction, there must be one or more accounts debited or one or more accounts credited, no? So, in this way, the accounting equation is always put into balance or equal balance. If the accounting equation, assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity, is not in balance, then you are certain that there is error in recording. So, the account debited are entered in the left side and the account credited are entered in the right side. Now, in relation to double entry system, introduce natin itong concept ng normal balance of an account. Kasi, di ba, ma-confuse tayo, kailan ba i-debit, kailan ba i-credit yung account. So, the normal balance of an account, no, will help us determine kung ito ba ay dapat kong i-debit or ito ba dapat kong i-credit. So, ano ba itong normal balances of accounts? So, the normal balance of an account refers to the side of the account, whether it is debit or credit, where increases are recorded. So, ibig sabihin, kapag sinabing ito yung normal balance ng account, ibig sabihin, yun yung side kung saan mag-i-increase, no? You can record increases in that particular account. So, This means that the normal balance of the account, again, will be your guide as to what side, whether debit or credit, are you going to record the account if you wish to increase or decrease it. So the normal balance of an account depends on its classification. So that is why it is important for you to be able to properly classify accounts according to elements. So as I've mentioned kanina, it's very important that alam natin kung ano ang element, kung saan belong ang isang account title. Kasi nga, kung alam mo kung ano yung classification ng account, so mas madali mong ma-analyze, kasi alam mo na kung ano yung normal balance niya. So, mas madali mo siyang ma-record. Okay? So, just to give you, the summary of the normal balances of the account. So, ito yun, Assets or asset, meron siyang normal balance na debit. So, ibig sabihin nito, kapag gusto mong i-increase ang asset, you just have to debit them. So, that's the equivalent, Kung gusto mong i-increase ang asset, dapat i-debit mo. Kasi yung normal balance niya ay debit. Liabilities, merong normal balance na credit. So, again, pag gusto mong i-increase ang liability, i-credit mo siya kasi normal balance niya ay credit. As well as owner's equity, credit din ang normal balance. Now, for owner's equity, di ba na-mention doon ang withdrawal? Ano ba yung epekto ng owner's equity or ng withdrawal sa owner's equity? So, since yung withdrawal, ang effect niya sa owner's equity ay nakaka-decrease, or nakaka-reduce ng owner's equity, meaning class, ang normal balance ng withdrawal ay debit. Okay? Bakit debit? Kasi nakaka-reduce siya sa owner's equity. Owner's equity, normal balance ay credit. So, ibig sabihin, kung ang withdrawal ay nakaka-decrease ng ating owner's equity, ibig sabihin nun, ang normal balance niya ay debit. Okay? Then, for income, kasi sabi natin yung income ay nakaka-increase sa ating owner's equity. So, therefore, yung normal balance din ng income natin ay credit. Whereas, yung expense ay nakaka-reduce ng owner's equity. So, therefore, yung normal balance niya ay debit. Now, I want to talk about contra asset kasi nakadiscuss na tayo kanina ng contra asset. So, example, yung accumulated depreciation. Contra asset, di ba, is a deduction to the related asset. So, ibig sabihin, kung ang asset natin, ang normal balance ay debit, ibig sabihin, pag ang pinag-uusapan ay contra asset, ano kaya ang normal balance nun? Yes, correct, It should be credit. So, kasi, kung contra asset siya, pangontra siya sa asset na ang normal balance ay debit, ibig sabihin, ang contra asset ay may normal balance na credit. Okay? Now, you can easily remember the normal balances of accounts by simply recalling the basic accounting equation. Kasi, pag nasa left side, that's your debit side. So, assets, for example, are in your left side, so they are debit. So, ang normal balance ng asset ay debit. Whereas, in your right side, that's your credit. So, that's for liabilities and owner's equity. So, ang normal balance ng liabilities siya owner's equity ay credit, because they are in the right side. Okay? So, check nga natin kung nakuha ba. So, example here, first, you identify the account classification, and then next is you identify the normal balance of the account. Okay? So, accounts receivable, ano kaya ang ating account classification nito? Accounts receivable is an asset. Okay? So, kay asset man siya, the normal balance is debit. Okay? Now, what about notes payable? Notes payable is classified as a liability. So, yung normal balance ng liability ay credit. What about Perez Capital? This is owner's equity account, tama? And then, ano ba yung normal balance ng Perez Capital or ng owner's equity? That is credit. What about service income? So, service income is an income account, no? The classification is income. So, ano ba normal balance nito? This is credit or meron siyang credit normal balance. What about salaries? So, salaries are considered or are classified as expense. So, therefore, ang normal balance niya ay debit. No? So, that's how you identify the normal balance. So, ito yung sinasabi ko na importante na maklasify nyo correctly, no, or appropriately ang ating account title, no, whether na-belong ba siya sa asset, liability, owner's equity, income, or expense. Kasi alam naman natin na pag yan ay asset, normal balance niya ay debit. So, this is already given. No? Liability, owner's equity, income, normal balance niya ay credit. Expense, normal balance niya ay debit. Again, no, ang liability, owner's equity, income, normal balance nila ay credit. Whereas expense, ang normal balance ay debit. Okay? So, now let us proceed to the rules of debit and credit. Ano naman ito? So, the rules of debit and credit serves as your guide in determining when to debit or credit an account. So, the rules are summarized in the table below. So, you have here, no? If the account classification is asset, then its normal balance is debit. Hence, if you are to increase the account, then you have to record it on the debit side. So, ibig sabihin, no, if that's an asset, the normal balance is debit. So, if you want to increase the asset, then you also have to record it in the debit side. Kasi nga, gusto mong i-increase siya. Kasi sabi natin, normal balance will tell us kung saang side mag-i-increase ang account. Okay? So, in this case, asset, normal balance debit. So, kung gusto mo i-increase, i-debit mo siya. Okay? Now, if you want to decrease the asset, for example, then you have to record it on the credit side. Bakit? Kasi, di ba, normal balance natin ay debit. So, kung gusto mong i-decrease, so ibig sabihin, dapat i-record mo siya doon sa credit side. Okay? Now, for liability, so if the account classification is liability, then its normal balance is credit. Hence, if you are going to increase, no, if you are to increase the account, you record it in the credit side. Pero kung gusto mong i-decrease, then you record it in the debit side, yung sa opposite side niya. The same also with owner's equity. So, since the normal balance is credit, so if you want to increase your owner's equity, you have to credit it. But if you want to decrease it, then you have to debit, no, the account. Also, the same with income. Kasi yung income, ang normal balance niya ay credit. So, kung gusto mong i-increase, i-credit mo, i-record mo siya sa credit side. Pero kung gusto mong i-decrease, i-record mo siya sa debit side. What about expense? No? So, expense, the normal balance of that is debit. So, if you want to increase the expense, then you have to record it in the debit side. But if you want to decrease it, then you have to record it in the credit side. Okay? So, let's proceed to the application of the rules of debit and credit. No? So, to apply the rules of debits and credits, let's consider the following transaction. So, example, no? You made a collection from a customer who previously availed credit. So, meaning, meron kang accounts receivable sa customer mo. Ngayon, kokolektahin mo na. So, since you already have the knowledge about double entry system, you know that in the above-mentioned transaction, there must be at least one debit and one credit, non-affected account. Hence, in this case, cash and accounts receivable are affected. No, kasi meron kang receivable, meron kang accounts receivable, tapos nakakolekta ka. So, meron kang cash. So, to analyze the transactions and apply the rules of debit and credit, you just have to follow this simple guide question. So, first, now what are the accounts affected? So, the accounts affected are assets, cash and accounts receivable. So, una, number 2, what is the classification of the affected accounts? So, accounts receivable as well as cash are considered assets. Okay? So, next, number 3, what is the normal balance of the affected account? So, since both are assets, the normal balance is debit. Okay? Now, number 4, upon collection, what happens to cash account? So, anong mangyayari pag nakakolekta ka, from your customer? Of course, the cash will increase, The cash account increases. So, considering that cash account increases, to which side you should record, this cash account? So, since cash account increases and its normal balance is debit, then it should be recorded in the debit side. Okay? So, meaning you have to debit cash kasi it increases. Number 6, upon collection, what happened to accounts receivable? Kasi nakolekta mo na, anong mangyayari sa receivable mo? Magre-reduce or magde-decrease siya. So, your accounts receivable account will decrease. So, considering that the accounts receivable decreases, to which side should you record it? So, since nag-decrease ang accounts receivable and its normal balance is debit, then to record the decrease, you have to record it in the credit side. So, I hope that you understand that application of the rules of debit and credit. So, if you have concerns related to this, please raise that during our online class. Okay, so let us check. So, identify the normal balance of an account and analyze whether to debit or credit an account based on the given scenario. So, you have here account title. So, cash and bank. Ano yung classification ng cash and bank? That's asset. So, kung asset yan, ang normal balance niya ay debit. Tama? Now, the scenario. What are you going to do? Are you going to debit the cash and bank account or credit it? Given that the cash and bank daw decreases. So, kung nag-decrease ang cash and bank, so anong gagawin mo? Are you going to debit it or credit it? Yes, correct. You are going to credit it. Kasi nga, nag-decrease. And the normal balance is debit. I hope, that is clear. Next, account title, accounts payable. So, ano yung account classification na to? This is liability. So, ano ba yung normal balance ng accounts payable? The normal balance is credit. Okay? Now, this time, the scenario is the accounts payable decreases. So, unsaon man nimo siya, i-debit nimo or i-credit? Correct. You are going to debit it because its normal balance is credit. Tapos, nag-decrease man siya. So, to reflect that decrease, you have to record it on the debit side. Okay? Now, Paris Capital, this is an equity account. So, its normal balance is credit. So, therefore, in the scenario na Paris Capital increases daw, so you have to record it in the credit side. Kasi nga, a normal balance credit, tapos nag-increase naman, so i-record mo siya sa credit side din. What about service income? Service income, ang normal balance nito ay credit kasi siya ay income account. So, sa scenario, the income daw or the service income increases. So, anong gagawin mo? Asan mo siya i-record? I-record mo siya in the credit side. Kasi nga, nag-increase siya and its normal balance is credit. So, dapat lang na i-record mo siya sa credit side. Last, we have here your salaries. Okay? So, salaries mo, this is an expense account. No? So, therefore, the normal balance of this is debit. So, sa scenario, the salaries expense daw increases. So, pag nag-increase yan siya, what you're going to do is you have to debit it. Kasi, the normal balance is debit and in the scenario given, the salaries increases. I have to debit the same. Okay? So, that's all. I hope it's clear to you. You understand the rules of debits and credit. So, again, what is important here is first, you should be able to identify or classify the account title, whether they are asset, their liability, equity, income, or expense. So, after that, pag alam mo na kung ano yung classification, dapat ma-identify mo din yung normal balance. So, as we know that the normal balance of an asset is debit as well as your expense. No? So, asset and expenses, meron silang debit na normal balance. Whereas, liabilities, owner's equity, and income or revenue, meron silang normal balance na credit. Okay? Now, if you know already na normal balances, then you will be confident on where to record the account, whether in the debit side or in the credit side, depending on the scenario given. Because, again, if the account increases, then you just have to record it on its normal side. So, for example, pag asset yan, tapos nag-increase, so since debit yung normal balance ng asset, so pag record mo, dapat i-debit mo din. So, aligned with the normal balance of the account. Now, if that is increases. Okay? Sige, so let's proceed to the last topic for this lesson. So, we have here the T account. So, what is this T account? So, T account is a basic summary device in accounting. So, if you want to summarize, for example, if you want to get the total or the balance of a certain account, then you use T account. You can utilize T account para mas mapadali natin. So, this can also be utilized to apply the rules of debits and credits and record the increases or decreases and the balance of each account. So, in this area here, I separated the balance sheet accounts and the income statement accounts. So, as you can see, generally asset accounts, ito normal balance ng asset account ay debit. So, therefore, pag merong increases, then you have to debit, you enter it in the debit side, dito sa left side. Pag meron namang decreases, you enter it in the credit side. Kasi nga, ang normal balance ng asset ay debit. So, pag nag-decrease siya, meaning dun ka sa kabilang side, which is the credit side. Okay? For liabilities, so since the normal balance of a liability account is credit, so any increases in your liability should be entered in the credit side. Kasi yan yung normal balance niya. Pag merong decreases, it should be entered in the debit side. Kasi nga, baliktad, Kasi yung normal balance niya ay credit. So, kung gusto mo i-decrease, ilagay mo siya sa other side, which is again, the debit side. The same also with owner's equity account. So, since itong mga accounts na to, ang normal balance ay credit, so kung gusto mo siyang i-increase, then you have to enter it in the credit side. Whereas, no, on the other hand, kung gusto mo siyang i-decrease, i-enter mo siya sa debit side. Okay, I hope that is clear. And then, lastly, for income statement accounts. No? So, what about this? So, for income statement accounts naman, no, your income accounts, meron silang normal balance na credit. So, kung gusto mo silang i-increase, so dito mo sila sa right side i-enter. Tapos, pag meron kang decreases, doon i-enter mo siya sa debit side. No, dito sa left side. For expenses, the normal balance of the account is debit. So, therefore, kung gusto mo siyang i-increase, then you just have to enter it in the debit side. Tapos, kung gusto mo siyang i-decrease, so dito naman siya sa credit side. So, again, I hope no, that that is clear to you. And if you still have questions regarding the lessons given, kasi nga medyo marami-rami yung lessons natin, just feel free no, to raise it during our online class para mas maliwanagan kayo. So, that will be all muna for this slide. No? So, I'll see you in lesson 5. Bye!